Hello, my name is Gabriel Ram. Today is the 23rd, I think, of October. It's 2010. I'm sitting with Danny. We don't have long, 15 minutes. And I wish to talk about, maybe give me an approach, because you know what I want to talk about.
Yes. What the biggest ingenuity or the biggest concept that is presented in consciousness way is taking things personally.
No. I thought you were going to ask me in working on yourself spiritually,
Yes.
wanting to get to a higher level of consciousness, what is the most important thing a person can do?
Yes.
You robbed me of my ability to give the punchline.
Yes.
The moment you...
Okay. I robbed you out of your punchline. Okay, so what does a person need when he's working on himself? What is the most important thing he can do to achieve high level of spirituality?
You really want to know?
Yes, I really want to know.
Well, it's interesting because when we look at different ways of inner work to reach a higher level of religious attainment, spiritual attainment, consciousness attainment, different paths talk about different things.
Yes.
I think Sufism talks about love,
Yes.
great devotion and love. If you do not have enough love towards God, then you couldn't go through a process of self-transformation.
Yes.
In Judaism, in Hasidic movement, we just talked about it before, the greatest obstacle is pride.
Yes.
And when they have stories of the great rabbis, they talk about how humble they are,
Yes.
destruction of the ego.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about Carlos Castaneda in his books talking about self-importance. Do you know of any other ways that put other things as important on the way to self-perfection?
I think that maybe Taoism is talking about non-action, not being driven by ego, but by other things which are transcendental maybe.
Okay, but this is not showing us what you should work on yourself
Yes.
to reach a higher level. Non-action is actually a result of something
Yes.
rather than means. But I'm sure that if we would have here a list of ways,
Yes.
then in Judaism we have what is called tikkun midot, which is actually working on your qualities. And if I need to analyze what they're saying you can be stingy or you can be generous. It's
Yes.
better to be generous. You can be kind or you can be cruel. It's
Yes.
better to be kind.
Yes.
You can and all kind of things in this way, and basically it's very much two-dimensional.
Yes.
It's dividing human beings to good and bad,
Mm-hmm.
and if you are good and having good thoughts and believe in good and be optimistic, then you are closer to God. If you go to the bad way, then you move away from God. If you are bad toward other people, you don't help them, you have pride, and etc., etc. Now I think that there is a confusion here because the line of good being good and not being good is a line of morality, and this is actually going from east to west.
Yes.
And it's the line of what is observable by ordinary consciousness.
Yes.
But when we talk about spiritual development, we talk about a line that goes from south to north. We're talking about vertical line. And here you don't have good and not good.
Yes.
You have a lower level and a higher level.
Yes.
And a person needs to overcome things in himself that pulls him down on his level. And this is beyond good and evil.
Yes.
Because good and evil is actually through a view which is not transcendental view.
Yes.
The line from south to north is transcendental.
Yes.
But the social view is a view that actually sees on one line.
Yes.
And then you have bad and good. So what I'm saying that the greatest obstacle moving from south to north is taking things personal.
Yes.
In other words, the more north you go on the line, the less you see things in a personal way. Good for me, bad for me, I am the center. What I want is for things for me to be good and to be complementary to me and to contribute to me. And the more north you go, the less you deal with you and the more you deal with the level that you manage to achieve. And you can have a high level of consciousness. You can be burning with religious spiritual fire.
Yes.
And this is a bit like the game of ladders and snakes. You know this game?
Yes.
Did you ever hear me talk about this?
No.
So when you go with a ladder, you always should go one step at a time. But to go down, you go with a snake.
Yes.
But you go all the way down and you crush.
Yes.
And there's nothing that brings you down more than taking something personal.
Yes.
Taking something personal, which means something happens to you which doesn't make you feel good.
Yes.
It's to do mainly with self-image and how you are perceived by others. And you take it in such a bad way that it causes you to go into crisis.
Yes.
This is taking things personal. And there's nothing which more makes you go down from high level to low level than taking things personal.
Yes.
And I think that this issue of fighting taking things personal and making a distance between you and you, making a gap between you and you, and treating what happens to you as though it happens to another human being, and to be neutral about the attitude of other people towards you. This is the highest level possible. Sorry, this is what allows you to reach a higher level possible.
Yes.
The moment you identify with what happens to you, and then you receive the full impact of feeling good about it and bad about it, this actually causes you to attach yourself to a snake.
Yes.
And going all the way down. Now the only way to stay on the north part of the vector is by disattaching yourself from what is happening to you. And treating what is happening to you as though it's happening to another human being. Like if you give me a compliment, of course I should be glad about it, but not identify with my gladness, not to be glad about the fact that I am glad. To be glad and to disattach myself. This allows me to be connected to the north part.
Yes.
If you insult me and you say something bad, I should not be happy about it, of course, but not be upset about being upset. The identification is the double action that you have about something good or something bad. The moment you have double action, you've got one click that causes you to go down from north level to south level. And I think that that issue, learning how not to take what happens to you personally, this is the one training which is very much missing in spiritual paths.
Yes.
And it's not possible to stay on the high level of the bar of consciousness or spirituality without training yourself not to take things personal.
Yes.
Now, not taking things personal doesn't mean that you're not authentic. Doesn't mean that you don't experience what happens to you powerfully. It doesn't mean that you feel deeply about what happens to you. It just means that you don't identify, you don't get lost in the good or bad aspect of what is happening to you.
There is something that
And if there is one thing that my teaching is to bring to the world, is that issue. And there isn't an issue which is more impossible for human beings to achieve than the issue of not identifying with the good and bad aspect of what happened to you and then taking it personal. This is an impossible mission because everything in our life is conditioning us and directing us towards taking what happens to us personally.
I want to, if you can clear out this point, that the taking it personally is the second time that what happens to you. It's the double action that you talked about. The first action is what happens to you.
No, first action is something good or bad happens to you.
Yes.
Pleasant or unpleasant.
Yes.
And then the second click is identifying, getting lost in,
Yes.
forgetting who you are and actually being addicted totally to that thing which is happening to you, which is good, but mostly identifying with the bad because it's easier to identify with the bad than with the good.
Yes. So by neutralizing the second effect is what you achieve. It doesn't mean that you give up your life and what you feel.
Just mean you don't get lost in what happens to you.
Yes.
If you experience something, most people see as high achievement getting lost in the experience.
Yes.
If you want to be spiritual conscious, you should experience what is happening to you with detachment.
Yes.
You should. It's actually a self-contradiction. It's a paradox.
Yes.
Be there and not be there at the same time.
Yes.
Be there, but not to the point that you lose your consciousness in what happened to you. Part of your consciousness is observing what is happening to you. That's the only way to be connected to the higher level of the bar of spirituality. If you lose the neutral aspect of looking at you, you have no means by which to attach yourself to a higher end of the bar.
Yes.
A person should preserve in himself a neutral view of him.
Yes.
If he gives up the neutral view, what happens is it's like an electrical wire, you have the positive and the negative, and then you get a small explosion.
Yes.
People all the time explode in themselves when they give up the neutral vector and when they identify with themselves.
Yes.
When you explode with negative or positive emotion, you burn up all the spirituality that managed to be contained in your life so far.
Yes.
Because spirituality is a higher fuel that a person should contain in himself just by the fact that he views what happens to him. If you allow yourself to explode about what happened to you, you burn huge amounts of spirituality. That's why people who go on a spiritual path and start to maintain a high level of energy, when they explode with a greater explosion than people that didn't go to spiritual path because they don't have these powerful energies.
Yes.
So it's not good to be personal anyway, but if you go on a spiritual path and you continue to be personal, that's a crime. Especially if on that path you have real high energies.
Yes. So if I understand you correctly, the more spirituality, the bigger the explosion.
I want to end this small session, which I see as one of the most important of the sessions I can give, because spiritual work or inner work is not about what you do, but by what you manage not to do. Because if you manage to come to a place where there is spirituality, in other words, you come to a place where there is a person who is connected to something higher than himself and he is passing through himself a higher energy, if you are open to that person, you can start to contain high level of energy, but only in one condition, that you don't identify with the positive or negative emotion that happens to you in your life. So you need two conditions. One, to find someone that carries a high level of presence with him. If you don't find a person like that, you can connect to it by going to sacred places, like churches, and mountains, and places in nature, or reading material with high level of potency in them. But that's only one part of the deal, connecting to the energy. Mm-hmm. The other part is being able not to take things personal. And so far, if we look at human history, the Bible, it's all stories of how people shot the spirituality in the head by taking things personal.
Yes.